My name is Philip McComish. I'm the managing partner of Watermark West Rare Books here in Wichita, Kansas. We've been in the rare books business since 1985. We originally started as a subcategory in the Watermark new bookstore. In early 1990s, we took over the entire building here, and we have not looked back since. We've been stuffing this building with books for the last 27 years, and we thought you might like to see some of the more interesting ones we've got. This is one of the earliest things we have in the store. It is a 1655 Elsevier published in Amsterdam by the Elseviers. It has an illuminated title page. It is a work by Erasmus on ecclesiastical church fraud at the time. It is all in Latin, so I am not even going to attempt to tell you what it's about beyond that. These little volumes bound in vellum, which is what this white type of sheepskin is called, are always very evocative, to my mind, of the earliest sorts of printing in Europe. Because while vellum are still done today, when you see one of these on a shelf, you make a beeline for it, because this is this one is not the Holy Grail, but vellum is always a good thing to find. Over here, this is a 2-volume set of the life and letters of the scientist Galileo Galilei. These were done in 1793. It's a 2-volume set. You can see the cover is off volume 1. But what I think is really interesting about these is that they are in the original paper covers. They are what are called unsophisticated. The paper is certainly shabby, but in most cases, these would have been rebound almost immediately upon issue into a more presentable binding for a gentleman's library. These have managed to survive as they were issued. These are two of the pieces of ephemera type material I was speaking about earlier. The one on the right is an invitation to a fundraiser for a baseball team here in Kansas, and it was printed in 1874. Near as I can tell, this is the earliest reference to baseball in the state of Kansas, and what you're looking at is the only surviving copy that I am aware of. It was obviously mounted in a scrapbook at some point. Now it's not. It is, however, just a charming little piece of baseball and Kansas history. Over here, we have a rather modest-looking paper wrap binding, but what it contains is an alphabetical list of the members of the Senate and the House of Representatives done in 1831. I believe this was issued only, as it says here, for the members' immediate use only. Not that they had Xerox machines, but they were not supposed to loan this out because, as you can see, it would tell you exactly where everybody lived, so you could go and buttonhole them and punch them if you didn't like it. You'll see the very first name is John Quincy Adams. Mr. Adams is, at this point, a former president who, after leaving the presidency, chose to go back to Congress and continue to serve there. The book also contains the names of James K. Polk and John Tyler, who were 2 future presidents. You can see that it shows where they are, what state they represented, and where they were living. These were generally boarding houses. Mrs. Reed's boarding house, Mrs. Cummings' boarding house, or Brown's Hotel for the gentleman from Tennessee. Apparently, he couldn't get boarding house. I don't know what happened to the gentleman from Missouri. He's living under a bridge. this is exactly the sort of ephemeral material that I really like. It was designed to be used, to be thrown away at the time. Nobody thought about saving it. And now it's here in scenic Wichita, Kansas. This is an album, a photograph album. In this case, it is of CDVs, what are called CDVs. It stands for French, and you're going to have to bear with me, carte de visite. In this case, they are all Civil War related. This album was assembled or presented to Lieutenant Frank Wing of the 5th Iowa Cavalry. He was in command of company, well, I don't remember what company offhand. But what's nice about it is that, yes, it has all the generals and officers, which is you've always find in these things. But because this was down to a troop level, it also includes the troopers, the privates, the sergeants, always in uniform. You can see their sabers there. In many cases, where the photographs were taken were printed on the back. And many of them are signed by the person depicted in the picture. The binding on this is typically rather decrepit, but it's really the contents that are the key. This is a 1918 color lithograph which documents an event that happened in France during World War I. In it, two black doughboys, Privates Henry Johnson and Needham Roberts, are depicted in the event that won them kudos for their heroism. One night they were on duty as sentries, guarding their outfit, which was the 369th Infantry, known as the Harlem Hellfighters. That night, about 20 to 30 Germans snuck up and attacked the two sentries, and the sentries, in the ensuing melee, managed to kill or wound 20 to 24 of the Germans. This was a huge event and made all the headlines in the papers back in the U.S., and the two black GIs were awarded the French Croix de Guerre, and they became the only, or not the only, but the first Americans to be awarded the Croix de Guerre in France during the First World War. It's really a remarkable document it's surprising that it has survived. This is a 1830s scrapbook. It's a commercial scrapbook done in full leather as it was bought probably in a stationery store. What's interesting about this one is that it was assembled and maintained by a young woman and really reflects the sensibilities of her time. It consists largely of items that she found interesting, images that she'd cut out of papers, or sadly, books, but they were things that interested her for reasons we may never really understand. Sometimes in these, trying to find a common thread that ties these things together is a battle you cannot win. It also includes what are called sentiments. That is, her friends would transcribe passages from the great works. In this case, this was done in 1829 by another young woman named Elizabeth M. Mott. By another young woman named Elizabeth M. Mott. I've not been able to find any information about Ms. Mott. And I suspect that with something like that, the young woman who put this together and is, I'm afraid, unidentified, probably did the hand coloring on many of these things herself using watercolors. They're still very bright and very nice. One of the most interesting things I found in this was that behind this card, she had slipped what is called miniature writing. Believe it or not, that little disc contains in the dead center the entire Lord's Prayer in miniature writing. It was done by another young woman named Martha Ann Honeywell of Leominster, New Hampshire. The amazing thing is, she did the micro writing, she put it on this disc, and she also did all the little cut paper border you see there. There's little feathery edged paper. And absolutely astonishing to me, it turns out that Miss Honeywell was born with no hands and only 1 foot and only 3 toes on that 1 foot. And she did all that amazing, delicate work with just 3 toes and basically her mouth. I don't understand how, but that's not my purview. Miss Honeywell made a living doing exactly this. We get most of our books these days from estates, when I buy an entire estate, or online. Those are pretty much where we are searching these days. Our specialties are increasingly the history of the American West, and increasingly we're interested in ephemeral matter, booklets, pamphlets, maps, documents, photographs. One of the things that has happened in the business of late, in the last 10 years, and certainly in the last 5, is that books per se have become a glut on the market because of the internet, because of economic conditions, because of an aging collector base, so on and so forth. Books are a tough thing to sell, and they're going to stay that way. Ephemeral matters, as I say, pamphlets, things that are small and easy to carry, light, are much more consistent with where we see the future in this business being. Our business at this point is 99% internet. And largely we're selling to institutions, that is university special collections, historical societies, state and local historical societies, and some individual collectors. The sad fact is that the general collector, who used to be our bread and butter, because of economics, the economic conditions, have quite sensibly decided they need to buy bread and butter rather than books. So we've sort of had to refocus who we target as our customer. I think the genie is out of the bottle as far as the internet is concerned. We're not going back. The economy is not going to pick up quickly, I'm afraid, so the collectors are getting older, and I don't see a new generation, at least for books, coming along. It's all very grim as far as books, but I see our future, as I say, in the sort of things that were printed to be thrown away 100 years ago. And fortunately, somebody chose not to throw it away. They probably stuffed it in a book and used it as a bookmark. And now it turns out that bookmark is worth more than the book is. So I'm reasonably optimistic. Every year I find things that nobody knows existed. And when you're in that situation, when you've got the only one, it's a seller's market.